all that investment. And I think that's where you get to more of the sustainability, because people who just do lean sometimes say, we get change fatigue, we're doing one project and another, we're trying to remember all these things, but it's not like what we've learned is necessarily supported or becomes like a completely natural way to act in the organization. It still feels like you're working uphill sometimes. And so to change that infrastructure, to capture those protocols in the organization, best practices, and to reinforce with the hiring and the training and the conflict resolution, so that that process way of working becomes just everyday practice, I think is one of the things that can make lean more sustainable. And then develop that plan of action for improving those work practices. I forgot I had one more, because when I was at Dartmouth 2 weeks ago, they talk a lot about microsystems, and what I like about microsystems is they get at a lot of these same dynamics, but what relational coordination does as a perspective is help you think about it in a nested way. And in fact, Marjorie was saying that they're doing the same thing. But this notion that you can look, as we did in the neonatology practice, what's going on in the microsystem, but you can also look across from the hospital to rehab to home, and then look at people who are potential system integrators. This was looking at people after joint replacements, a follow-up study to the first one, where we were looking at relational coordination between people in the hospital, at the rehab, and home care, and then looking for, as potential system integrators, the PCP, the informal caregiver, that was the family member who was chosen by the patient as the person who was most involved in their care, and the managed care case manager. And we surveyed them all about relational coordination with each other. And that was at the patient level. It was very hard because, after they leave the hospital, they can go to so many different places. It was really hard to track. But what we did find was, I guess as you would expect, within the hospital, within rehab, and within home care, you have relatively high levels of relational coordination. We know that that's not, we have some weak areas there too. And we can look at those, but relatively strong. They were all at least higher than a 3. But then it's across it's between rehab and hospital, and it's across those settings where it gets very weak. The only place where it was strong across settings was between the home PT and the orthopedic surgeon, because that home PT really, that's the person she would check back with to say, is this what you really had in mind for this patient, he or she? But then system integrators, you say, well, maybe it's okay to have fairly weak ties across if there's someone who's keeping it all together. The only party who was consistently had strong ties at each stage was the family member. Yeah, which, we all know from our own experiences that that's often the way it happens. If you're not there, and sometimes feels that way even within a setting, if you're not there, something's going to go wrong. And that, you can say, well, that's good, that's patient empowerment, that's getting the family involved, but that's happening by default and not by design. It's by default a fragmented system. So it's just, this is not to point out solutions so much as to say you can start to identify the patterns of coordination, not only at the micro, but the more macro level. And that's going to be critical even at a more macro level as we moved into the accountable care setting, where we're really looking at multiple players trying to produce these outcomes together. So to achieve those outcomes at the ACO level will require coordination across the micro and the macro.
I don't think they know what ACO is.
The Accountable Care Organization. So under the new Patient Accountable Care Act is going to be one of the policy initiatives is to allow healthcare organizations to combine in any way they want to take responsibility for the cost and quality outcomes of the patients in that population. And and one of the ways they get rewarded for that is they would take the baseline, whatever of the last couple of years the cost of serving that population was, and if they can maintain the quality of the care and do it at a lower cost, they will share significantly between themselves and Medicaid or whoever the payer is the cost savings. And so to try to find ways to band together, whether it's a hospital and all the post-acute providers, or it could be any combination of providers in a particular area, to provide care at a lower cost and then get some of those savings back. So you start to see some reward for reducing readmissions rather than a reward for increasing readmissions. So people I've been talking to, like in Indiana, who are moving toward this 18-hospital accountable care organization, are saying, they almost had tears in their eyes. They're saying, we're finally going to have an organizational form that rewards us for doing what we've been thinking we should be doing for all these years, but we couldn't do it financially because there's no reward. And you actually get hurt if you reduce your readmits. And now we can get rewarded for doing the right thing and for promoting wellness, right? So if you keep people out of the hospital, you're going to do better financially rather than getting hurt for it. So it starts to reward people to do a lot of partnering with a broader set of stakeholders, including employers and schools and public health, to create wellness outcomes for a population rather than just treating the ill.